He said she didn't deserve a room, so Martha Reed gave him a courtroom instead. The eviction notice wasn't mailed, it was taped to the fridge. By the time Scott Carver blinked, the locks had changed, the deed had been filed, and the guest suite bore a brass plaque that didn't include his name. She didn't raise her voice. She raised a case file, and when the judge ruled, it wasn't just restitution, it was restoration. All right. Before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The door opened before she knocked, like he'd been watching her from the window. Martha Reed didn't flinch, even when Scott Carver leaned against the frame in a sleeveless shirt and that same arrogant grin that always made her fingers tighten around her purse straps. Behind him, the TV blared with sports commentary, each shout from the announcer vibrating through the floorboards. Actually, Scott said, drawing the word out like a flex, we turned your room into my home gym. He didn't move aside. Martha raised an eyebrow, not stepping back. Excuse me, your old room? He jerked a thumb behind him. Peloton, free weights, resistance bands. I needed space, been focusing on longevity. He smiled, smug. You know how it is. Jenna appeared like a shadow behind him, arms crossed, avoiding Martha's gaze. Her voice was a whisper pretending to be reason. It was the only space we had left. You know how fast Noah's growing. Martha's eyes drifted upward, toward the corner window that used to overlook the magnolia tree. The curtains were gone. So was the warmth. Before she could respond, Noah rushed down the hallway in socks and a frayed hoodie. He didn't say a word, just wrapped his arms tight around her waist and buried his face in her shoulder. Sorry, Grandma, he mumbled, and the words pressed heavier than his hug. She exhaled softly and kissed the top of his head. Come on in, Scott said, already turning back to the couch. Game's on. Hope you don't mind sharing the pullout with the remote. The house smelled like reheated pizza and half-scrubbed lemon cleaner. The scent warred with itself in the living room, where the pull-out sofa sat exposed, the sheet still creased from the last time someone had bothered to fold it. The coffee table was littered with coasters and crumbs. Martha didn't take off her shoes. That night she lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked with every turn, the rhythm syncopated with the football crowd roaring from the TV. Scott whooped at every play, then cursed when the ref made a bad call. Jenna said nothing. The walls absorbed it all, and Martha just lay there, still, quiet, and completely unseen. She heard the hiss of a can opening at midnight, heard him laugh at something on his phone, heard Jenna whisper sheesh once, only to be ignored. In the morning the coffee was cold by the time Martha got to the kitchen. Scott stood there, smug as always, stirring in powdered creamer. You'll be fine, he said, not even looking up. It's just a visit, not a right. She stared at him for a long moment, like someone measuring an enemy across a negotiation table. Interesting perspective, she said. Her voice was smooth, but her hands didn't tremble. She turned without ceremony, walked to the hall closet, pulled her sweater off the hook. Martha, wait. Jenna called from the hallway, barefoot and blinking sleep. I've got errands to run, Martha said evenly, picking up her bag. It's clear I'm in the way. Noah looked up from the table, eyes wide behind his glasses. You just got here. I'll see you soon, sweet boy. She gave him a small smile, touched his cheek. Take care of your sketchbook. Scott was back on the couch, didn't even look up. Martha stepped outside into the thick Charleston heat. The sky had that soft, pale glow of late morning, and the cicadas were already at full chorus. She moved with quiet precision to her car and opened the driver's side door. Inside, she sat for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel. Her jaw clenched once, then relaxed. She reached into her glove box and pulled out an old flip phone she hadn't used in years, but kept charged for exactly this kind of day. She scrolled to the name, Terrence Long. She pressed call. One ring, two. A voice picked up, warm, familiar, unmistakably sharp. Martha, she closed her eyes. Terrence, she said, calm and certain, I think it's time. The clink of coffee mugs and the low hum of morning conversation surrounded Martha as she slid into the booth at Keller's Diner, the vinyl seat hissing beneath her like it had a secret to keep. Her purse went to her left. 3 manila folders, neatly stacked, sealed with labeled post-its, went to her right. Across from her, Terence Long looked older than she remembered, but no less sharp. His silver-framed glasses sat on the bridge of his nose like a judge about to sentence someone to hell. He hadn't changed his coffee order in 20 years. Black, no sugar, no cream. The steam rising from his mug curled like cigarette smoke. "I wondered when you'd come calling," he said, eyes dropping to the folders with an approving nod. That smug little prick must have pushed harder than usual. Martha didn't smile. "He told me I didn't deserve a room, while standing in a house I helped pay for." Terence leaned back, fingers steepled. "Well now, that's what I'd call an opening statement." She pushed the first folder forward. "Start with the pink tab. Financials. I've been tracking every rental he's run through my half of the beach duplex. 3 years worth of guest payouts, plus screen grabs of his listings." Terence opened the folder with the kind of care a surgeon reserves for a scalpel. His eyes scanned, pages turned. A low whistle escaped his lips. "So this is how Mr. Entrepreneur funds his ego. Taxable income too. Unreported, if I had to guess." The second folder followed. Blue tab. Text message transcripts. Screenshots from Jenna, from Noah. Even a few carelessly sent from Scott's own phone that Martha had quietly forwarded to herself over the years. Disrespect wasn't new. What had changed was the threshold for silence. "He called me a placeholder. Told Jenna I was too old-fashioned to understand real estate." Martha's tone didn't waver. She tapped the folder. "I may not own a business, but I sure as hell know how to record one." Terence opened the third folder. Yellow tab. A copy of the deed, original notarized, with both Martha's and her late husband Alan's names in black ink. No mention of Scott Carver. No co-signature. Nothing more than a ghost on the property. "So," Terence said, lifting his coffee but not drinking it, "you want it clean-cut and public." Martha finally looked him square in the face. No threats, just consequences. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You always did have the sharpest knife in the drawer. You just never pulled it unless someone bled on your rug first." The waitress arrived with their breakfast. 2 plates, identical scrambled eggs, grits, wheat toast. Terence nodded his thanks, but his focus never left the folders. Martha picked up her fork but didn't eat. "I want an eviction notice drafted under South Carolina's implied use clause. He's been using my property for profit and presenting it as his own. I never gave written consent. And since he's not on the deed, we hit him as an unauthorized occupant," Terence added, mouth tightening in thought. "You can also pursue breach of quiet enjoyment, since he's impacted your use of the shared space. Might even open the door to a civil suit. Let's start with the eviction and the breach. I don't want to throw punches. I want to set boundaries." She paused, then added, "Firm ones." He nodded slowly, running a thumb along the folder's edge. "You sure you're ready for legal war?" Martha leaned in, her eyes like cold steel polished by patience. He started it at the door. The salt air curled through the open window of Martha's sedan as she pulled into the narrow gravel drive of the beach duplex. Hers, though you'd never know it by the condition of the place now. Weeds crept from the fence line. A rusted Weber grill leaned like a wounded soldier near the porch, and above, fluttering in the sticky breeze, a plastic banner clung to the second-story balcony. "Book now. Luxury beachfront getaway." Martha stared up at the vinyl lettering, as if it were graffiti on her name. It hung over her half of the duplex like a dare. Scott had claimed the upstairs unit, her unit for the last 3 years. What started as a quiet arrangement, a gesture of goodwill after Alan's passing, had curdled into entitlement. He'd listed it on Airbnb under Carver Coastal Stays LLC, brought in strangers, partied on her deck, and cashed every payment while leaving the downstairs empty except for broken blinds and mildew. Not once had he paid rent. Not once had he asked. She unlocked the downstairs door. Her key still worked and stepped into stale air. The floor creaked beneath her, but the bones of the place held. A thin film of dust blanketed the counter. Her late husband's toolbox sat untouched under the kitchen sink, right where he'd left it. She didn't linger. This wasn't a nostalgia trip. Back in Charleston that evening, she drove straight to the courthouse annex and filed the affidavit of ownership and notice of physical rebel entry under South Carolina's owner-occupant reclamation statute. As long as one unit was vacant and she held title, both true, she could reclaim her space. At home, Carmen Ortega stood at Martha's front porch, watering rosemary and begonias when she returned. "Well?" Carmen asked, holding the hose like a sword. "He's about to learn the legal definition of unauthorized use," Martha said, handing her a fresh copy of the stamped affidavit. Carmen skimmed, brows climbing. "You really filed it. I've let them play house long enough." Martha looked out toward the late summer horizon, red bleeding into pink above the oaks. Time to take the roof back. Inside, they sat at the kitchen table, and Martha unfolded a stack of documents with a calm, meticulous rhythm. A copy of the deed, email printouts, the business listing for Carver Coastal Stays, a spreadsheet she'd kept, quietly daily, tallying every rental guest who walked across her floors without her consent. "You letting them know?" Carmen asked, peering over her glasses, "or letting them guess?" "They'll know," Martha said, her mouth twitching at the corner. "They'll know when the locks change." Monday evening, Martha called Coastal Safe and Sound, a licensed locksmith company. A calm, polite voice answered. She requested a full lock replacement, front, side and back doors of Unit A plus keypad access reset for the upstairs unit. "Tuesday morning," she said. 9 o'clock sharp. "I'll be there with the deed." The voice confirmed. She hung up and folded her hands on the table, eyes steady. Upstairs at Scott and Jenna's rental, a couple from Ohio had just checked in. They posed on the deck for sunset selfies, unaware the very property they'd booked under Scott Carver Superhost wasn't his to offer. Martha opened her laptop one last time before bed and scrolled through Scott's Airbnb page. Dozens of 5-star reviews. Phrases like "Scott was attentive," and "We loved the vintage touches in this charming space." Martha scoffed softly. Those vintage touches were Alan's, not Scott's, and they'd be used one final weekend, because Tuesday at 9 a.m., the doors would say otherwise. The paper trembled only slightly in Martha's hand, not from fear but precision. She had printed 3 copies, all in crisp black ink, the letterhead bearing Terrence Long's law office and her full legal name. The language was clear, neutral, undeniably final. The screen door creaked as she stepped into Jenna and Scott's foyer unannounced, the late morning sun casting long shadows behind her. The house smelled of cheap cologne and burnt toaster waffles, the kind Noah always left too long. Jenna looked up from the couch, startled, mascara wand still in hand. "Mom, I won't be long." Martha moved calmly toward the kitchen, where the hum of the refrigerator covered her footsteps. She opened the junk drawer, found a roll of tape with one corner gummed up from dried jelly, and peeled it clean. Then she affixed the notice, centered eye level, right on the fridge door. "The way you'd post a missing dog flyer, or a eulogy." "What is that?" Jenna asked, rising, her voice wobbling. "A notice of retraction. You've got 14 days to vacate the upstairs unit, or respond legally. After that, entry without consent will be considered trespassing." Scott's footsteps thundered down the hall. He appeared in the doorway in gym shorts, half a protein shake still foaming in his bottle. "You're kidding me. You taped a what to our fridge?" "It's not your fridge," Martha said coolly. "It's mine, same as the floors, same as the foundation." Jenna stepped between them, hands raised like a referee. "Can't we talk about this, please? Maybe just dinner, without papers and drama." Martha met her daughter's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Panic, yes, but also shame. "We passed talking," Martha said quietly. "We passed it the day you turned my bedroom into a cardio zone." Scott scoffed. You can't legally evict family, lady. Martha turned. You're not family. You're a tenant without a lease. A man with no claim, no deed, and no decency. He laughed, but it rang hollow. Wow, real classy, Marth. You always did think you were above everyone. But this, you're gonna tear your family apart over a beach house? I'm not tearing anything, she said, stepping toward the door. I'm repairing what you cracked wide open. Jenna followed her to the porch. You don't mean this, she said, but even her voice was wilting under the weight of reality. You're just mad. I'm resolved, Martha corrected. The porch boards creaked under her sandals. The afternoon heat had begun to swell already, coating everything in damp weight. Birds chirped absently in the oak trees. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower coughed to life. She got into her car without slamming the door. She drove without speeding. Dignity didn't require volume. Later that night, after she'd fed the cat and wiped down her kitchen counters twice out of habit, her phone buzzed. Noah, I'm sorry. He's making Mom cry. Martha stared at the message for a long time, her fingers hovering over the screen. She wanted to respond, wanted to comfort him, but any reply would make Noah the courier in a war that wasn't his. She set the phone down. The kettle began to hiss on the stove. An hour later she received another notification, this time from Facebook. Scott had posted a blurry photo of the duplex deck at sunset with a caption in blocky white font, "Some people don't know when they're not needed anymore." Below it, 3 mutual friends had already commented with things like "Hope everything's okay," and "Ignore the drama, haters gonna hate." Martha didn't reply. She didn't need to. She reached across the table and clicked the file labeled "Screenshot Carver Defamatory Post, 8:47 p.m., then saved it. Scott Carver pulled into the gravel lot with the confidence of a man who believed consequences were for other people. His leased black Escalade hissed to a stop beside the hydrangea bush he'd long stopped trimming, tires crunching over sun-baked shells. The man in the passenger seat, his potential investor, slick hair and mirrored sunglasses, stepped out behind him, hands on his hips, eyeing the coastal property like a hawk. "This the one?" the man asked, eyeing the duplex with a contractor's squint. "Oh yeah," Scott said, adjusting his collar and tossing his keys in the air. "This is our best rental, stays booked 9 months out of the year. Built-in clientele. Solid ROI. Wait until you see the inside. Classic Charleston charm, right down to the floors." He climbed the porch steps 2 at a time, swiped his phone to launch the smart lock app and grinned. Beep, red light. Lock did not disengage. Scott frowned, tapped again. Denied. The porch fan creaked overhead as a gust of sea wind swept past them. "That's weird," he muttered, poking at the keypad. He tried the manual override code, then the default reset. Nothing. "Battery issue?" the investor asked, already skeptical. No, I updated it just last week," Scott replied, his voice climbing with each denial. Then he noticed it, a laminated sheet, neatly taped just above the keypad, printed in black and white. "Notice of reclaimed property use, per South Carolina law, section 274230. Entry requires verified owner presence." His grin dissolved. "Martha. Hang on," he growled, pulling out his phone. He called her. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. He left a message the 3rd time, words clanging out fast and furious. "Martha, what the hell is this? I've got people here. You can't just lock me out of my own listing. We had an arrangement. You're gonna regret this." The investor cleared his throat. "You want to reschedule?" Scott waved him off with a forced laugh. "Just a minor misunderstanding. You know how it is with older folks and property. Gets sentimental." He kept grinning until the man walked back to his car, clearly not sold. He kicked the porch railing hard enough to send a splinter flying. 3 miles downshore, Martha and Carmen sat on the 2nd-story balcony of the now secured Unit A, clinking glasses of iced tea over lemon slices and a breeze that didn't carry Scott's voice anymore. Carmen leaned back in the wicker chair, sunglasses perched like armor. You hear something? Just the wind, Martha said, folding her phone face down on the table, and the sound of boundaries being enforced. She'd watched the Escalade arrive on the doorbell cam, watched Scott's face twist when the lock didn't click. She'd saved that clip too, labeled it Tuesday_entry attempt_9_03 am.move. You didn't answer? Carmen asked, sipping. I don't answer tantrums. They toasted again. Downstairs, the new keypad glowed blue, waiting for Martha's fingerprint. Upstairs, the unit was immaculate. No more short-term renters. No strangers rifling through drawers. Alan's things, once boxed in a corner, now restored to their shelves. By noon, Martha received a string of texts from Jenna. Can we please just talk? Scott's freaking out. I didn't know about the investor visit, I swear. We can still fix this, Mom. Just don't escalate. We're family. Please. Martha read every line slowly. She didn't reply. She forwarded the entire chain to Terrence with the subject line, attempted negotiation, do not respond that afternoon. Terrence filed a formal notice of civil breach against Carver Coastal Stays LLC, citing unauthorized operation of a rental business on jointly owned residential property, lack of written consent, and misuse of tenant agreements under Martha's name. The notice triggered a state business review, and Scott, who thought he was being shut out of a beach house, hadn't yet realized he was being shut out of his business. The waiting room of the Charleston County Courthouse smelled faintly of floor wax and indifference. A bailiff's shoes squeaked in passing. A rusted wall clock ticked down the minutes with bureaucratic finality. Martha sat calmly in the corner, spine straight, heels crossed, a navy blue binder resting neatly on her lap. Her blouse was pressed, her pearls understated. A silver pen peeked from her front pocket like a signature waiting to happen. Across the room, Scott bounced his leg restlessly. He wore a wrinkled blazer and no tie. His phone lit up every few seconds with unread messages. One read, "We're all rooting for you, babe." The others were less kind, tenants asking about canceled bookings, refund policies, and why the Airbnb listing had vanished overnight. He muttered to Jenna under his breath, "She's bluffing. Mediation's just paperwork and talk." Jenna didn't respond. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived, except to thank the receptionist and quietly ask where the restroom was. She clutched her purse like it held her spine inside. The clerk finally opened the door to hearing room. Parties for Reed versus Carver Coastal Stays LLC. Martha rose first. Terrence followed a beat behind, carrying a thin leather case. His expression was unreadable. The man didn't walk. He moved like punctuation. Inside the small chamber, a judge in wire-rimmed glasses adjusted her robe and gestured them forward. Martha placed the binder on the table with care. She didn't speak until prompted. Scott leaned in toward his wife, whispering something sharp. Jenna didn't meet his eye. The judge began. This is a civil preliminary regarding breach of use and disputed property operations between Mrs. Martha Reed and Mr. Scott Carver, operating under Carver Coastal Stays LLC. She looked up. Mrs. Reed, you initiated this hearing. I did, Martha replied, voice measured. I've come to enforce legal boundaries that have been ignored for 3 years. The judge glanced at Scott. Mr. Carver, would you like to begin with your side of the story? Scott cleared his throat. Sure. Look, we had an informal understanding. Martha, we call her Mom, gave us access to the duplex. She even stayed with us while we managed the place. There was no lease, no paperwork, but there was a mutual understanding. Martha lifted a hand slightly. I'd like to correct that. The judge nodded. Go ahead. I gave my daughter access to the property as a courtesy after my husband died. Scott moved himself in. I never consented to his business operating under my roof. Scott laughed nervously. You never objected. Martha didn't blink. You never asked. Terrence opened the binder with surgical ease, revealing tabbed exhibits, the deed listing Martha and Alan Reed as sole owners, the Airbnb revenue printouts, copies of guest complaints, tax records, and the laminated notice from the fridge, now Exhibit F. The judge flipped through the pages. Mr. Carver, Can you explain why these records show income deposited to your business account from a property you don't legally own? Scott shifted in his chair. It was verbal permission. Family permission. Did you assume verbal permission meant inheritance? The judge asked, eyebrows arched. Scott opened his mouth, closed it. Terrence slid a final page forward. A notarized declaration of ownership, with Martha's signature and the attached statement of non-consent. This was filed with the county 2 weeks ago, Your Honor. Prior to the date Mr. Carver attempted to show the unit to a potential investor. Jenna buried her face in her hands. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Then, lifting her pen, she jotted something into the docket file. Pending full resolution, I am ordering a 30-day injunction on all rental income derived from this property effective immediately. Any further attempts to profit from or represent ownership of this residence will constitute contempt. Scott blinked. You're siding with her. I'm siding with the law, the judge said coolly. And with the person who brought the deed in a binder. The air inside the duplex was stale, tinged with leftover sunscreen, sea salt, and something faintly synthetic, cheap plug-in air freshener trying too hard to cover up everything real. Martha stood in the middle of the downstairs unit, eyes scanning the room she once filled with her own quiet rituals, Sunday crossword mornings, Alan's black coffee percolating on the stovetop, the scent of cedar oil lingering from the old wood dresser. None of that remained. Instead, her quilts were folded in a box labeled Lenin's Misk, shoved against the pantry door like afterthoughts. The antique side table she'd brought back from Asheville sat under a tangle of phone chargers and a yoga mat. On the kitchen counter, the floral teacups she inherited from her mother were wrapped in crumpled grocery circulars, not even marked fragile. They'd packed her life like a yard sale that didn't sell. She didn't flinch. She only moved slow and methodical. Carmen arrived minutes later, dressed in canvas pants and work gloves, her hair pinned back tight. You sure about this? Carmen asked, eyeing the hallway. I was sure when I filed the injunction, Martha said, bending to retrieve a carved wooden box from under the bed. I'm just following through. The two women worked for hours, sorting, boxing, labeling, every photo album, every piece of embroidered linen, Martha's pressed book collection, Alan's rust-stained fishing boots. They found a child's crayon drawing tucked behind a loose drawer in the old desk, a sketch of a stick figure family standing by a crooked house with "My Home" written above it in shaky purple letters. Martha stared at the name scrawled in the corner. Jenna, age 6. She didn't cry. She folded it and placed it in a folder labeled Keep, Personal, and moved on. By late afternoon, the U-Haul was loaded. Carmen double-checked each label for Martha only, scrawled in thick black Sharpie on every bin. No ambiguity, no interpretation. They drove to a quiet row of storage units off Folly Road. Unit hash 117. Climate-controlled. Clean. She paid the first year in full. When they closed the latch and snapped on the lock, Carmen handed Martha the key like she was passing a crown. It's yours, Carmen said. It always was, Martha replied. The next morning, Scott drove to the duplex alone. His car rumbled up the gravel drive, a fresh rage brewing after another canceled reservation email. He parked crooked, still in his slippers, a half-eaten protein bar in one hand. The keypad on the garage door blinked green but opened to a haunting stillness. The shelves were empty. The storage bins he used for tools and beach gear, gone. The plastic cooler with the missing latch, gone. Even the wall hooks were bare. Only one thing remained, taped neatly to the inside of the garage door. A laminated sign. Black ink, bold font. This space has been reclaimed by the rightful owner. All unauthorized items have been removed. Scott blinked, once, twice. Then he slammed the door shut, and kicked it so hard the bottom dented inward. He stormed into the main house, muttering profanities, shoved his phone into his pocket, and opened the fridge, only to find it equally bare. Jenna came down the stairs, holding a thin envelope. She looked pale. This came for me, she said. Voice flat. What is it now? He barked. She handed it over. The seal bore the emblem of the Charleston County Clerk. Scott ripped it open, expecting more eviction threats, more noise. But it wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Jenna Reed Carver. You are hereby named joint defendant in the civil action case initiated by Martha Reed. Scott's grip tightened. What the hell did she do? Jenna's eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She didn't just take her things back, she whispered. She's taking it all. The invitation never came. For the first time in 17 years, Martha didn't send out her handwritten holiday card, the one with the watercolor snowflakes and cursive Christmas Eve supper. Same place, same time. There were no calls to confirm side dishes, no grocery list for honey ham, no pine-scented candles in the front hallway. Instead, she opened the envelope containing the deed reinstatement and ran her fingers over the embossed seal, like it was a gift wrapped just for her. Her phone buzzed twice on December 22nd, once from Jenna, once from Scott. Neither message was opened. The same day, she drove to the duplex, parked beneath the skeletal oaks, and stepped into her half of the house with a tote bag of cinnamon sticks, a fresh table runner, and one strand of warm white lights. She didn't look at the other side of the house. She didn't have to. By nightfall, the old place smelled like cloves and fir needles, the stereo whispering Nat King Cole in the background. The fire popped gently in the hearth. She lit one candle, placed a wreath of dried oranges on the door, and locked it twice. Christmas Eve morning. Noah arrived on her porch with his backpack slung over one shoulder and a sketch pad under the other arm. No drama, no fanfare, just a quiet knock and a soft "Hey, Grandma." She pulled him into a hug that lasted a full 10 seconds. They didn't talk much that morning. They didn't need to. He helped string lights along the mantel and hung ornaments in a lopsided pattern only he seemed to understand. Martha made gingerbread dough from scratch while he sat cross-legged on the rug, sketching a reindeer in a Santa hat. Outside, the wind lifted salt into the air. Inside, warmth clung to the windows like a promise. At one point, Noah put on a vinyl Bowman Crosby record, and they danced terribly, in their socks. Across town, Jenna stood in her half-decorated living room, holding her phone, eyes fixed on the unanswered text chain. Noah, please come home. We can open gifts early. He's trying, baby, I swear. Just please answer. Noah saw the texts. Read every one. Set the phone face down beside his mug of cocoa and didn't touch it again. He watched Martha wrap a set of books for the town library's donation bin, each one tied with twine, each one labeled in her neat, looping print. Later that night, they sat on the porch in matching knit blankets, rocking gently while the tide hushed in the distance. The Christmas tree behind them glowed in the window. Noah opened his sketch pad, turned to a blank page, and began to draw. The lines were soft, the shading slow. He didn't speak until the page was almost filled. I drew you, he said, angling it toward her. Like you looked just now. Martha took it, eyes scanning the penciled image. It showed her in the porch rocker, eyes closed, mouth curled into something peaceful. A woman at ease, not at war. He'd even drawn her favorite cardigan, every line, every thread, like a suit of armor worn without bitterness. I don't remember the last time someone saw me like that, she whispered. I always did, Noah said simply. They sat like that for a long while, wordless and full. Then footsteps on the gravel path. Carmen appeared in her long winter coat, the wind tugging at her scarf, a manila envelope clutched under her arm. Her boots crunched across the walk as she held the package out to Martha. No rush, Carmen said, though her eyes gleamed. But it's notarized, and once it's filed, it goes public in January. Martha took the envelope, heart steady now. Her Christmas gift had already arrived. Scott always prided himself on being untouchable. He deleted texts, wiped browser histories, and spoke in vague suggestions rather than written commitment. His favorite phrase, let's keep it verbal cleaner that way. But Martha had never been a clean slate kind of woman. She'd lived her life by documentation, not declarations, and she had saved everything. In Terence Long's law office that rainy January afternoon, she opened a thick accordion file that snapped like a rib cage releasing tension. The contents inside weren't just damning, they were chronological. Terence adjusted his glasses, eyes skimming over the first set of documents. You weren't just watching, he said with a low whistle. You were building an archive. I learned from the best, Martha said, sliding over the tab labeled Unauthorized Earnings 2020 to 2023. Receipts from Airbnb payouts tied to Scott's LLC, she continued. Every guest review, corresponding dates cross-checked with power usage spikes from the electric bills. He didn't even try to mask the stays. Terence's lips twitched upward. God help him if this hits audit. Oh, it will, Martha said, cool and certain. He made my house his ATM. Now it's time for the balance. By the window, Clarence, the firm's newly promoted associate and a pit bull in khakis, tapped away at his laptop. I just submitted the fraud claim to Airbnb's compliance division. They take unverified ownership very seriously, especially when the platform's used for business fronting. What's their turnaround? Terence asked. Could be hours. Could be days. Clarence didn't look up. But we've also just flagged the LLC with the state of South Carolina. Fraudulent use of unowned real estate is a violation of 3 separate statutes. Martha set down a new folder. Screenshots of Scott coordinating stays through private messages after I restricted his account. This one even brags about getting around the old woman's drama. Terence flipped through, jaw tightening. These texts alone would bury most men. He said I wouldn't go through with it, a voice said from the doorway. Jenna stood there, rain matting her hair, her coat clinging to her like regret. Her eyes flicked to the stack of documents, then back to her mother. He told me you were bluffing, she said, barely above a whisper, that you'd never take it this far. Martha didn't rise. She didn't offer tea or sympathy. He counted on my silence, she replied. Not my archives. Jenna blinked quickly. I didn't know about all this. About the money. The private listings. I swear I didn't. Martha cut her off gently. Then you weren't looking, but I was. I've been looking for a long time. Jenna's hand dropped to her side. What happens now? Before Martha could answer, Clarence turned from his laptop, his tone suddenly sharp. We just received confirmation. He looked at both women. A federal subpoena has been issued for Carver Coastal Stays business accounts. Terence leaned forward. On what grounds? Suspicious earnings patterns, tax avoidance, and something else. 2 flagged transfers to a secondary bank account, opened under a different entity, Carver Home Ventures. Martha's eyes narrowed. Shell account. Looks like it, Clarence replied. Funds moved monthly. Same amounts Airbnb issued. He's been laundering the payouts through a second channel. Terence gave a low whistle. And now it's criminal. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming the windows with a rhythmic urgency. The room felt charged, like thunder had walked through but hadn't finished its business. Jenna sank into the chair beside her mother, visibly rattled. You really did keep everything. Martha didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned the binder around, one hand resting on the final page. I kept what mattered, she said, because he thought erasing the emails meant erasing the truth. A notification pinged on Clarence's screen. He read it once, then again. He looked up, voice sharper now. Scott's bank just froze 2 accounts for irregular activity. Treasury's been alerted. Terence leaned back in his chair. Well, he said, merry damn January. The request came tucked between 2 junk emails, one promising a Medicare rebate, the other a coupon for orthopedic slippers. But the subject line stopped Martha cold. Inquiry. Feature interview on property abuse and elder law. The sender was Claire Whitman, staff writer for the Tideland Voice, a modest paper with just enough circulation to rattle egos and stir polite Charleston society into whispering over brunch. Martha read the email twice. Then again, Claire had written, We've followed the public records on the Reed v. Carver case. If you're open to speaking, we'd love to tell the story in your words, not the court's, yours. Martha didn't reply right away. She brewed tea, watered the basil, watched a squirrel try and fail to navigate her bird feeder like an entitled guest overstaying his welcome. That evening she called Claire. You may record, Martha said. but only with context. I'm not here to be pitied. Claire's voice came through with warmth and quiet reverence. Of course, I'm not interested in pity. I'm interested in what justice looks like when it's not loud, but surgical. They met the next morning on Martha's porch. Claire wore jeans and a vintage blazer that didn't quite fit, with a notepad she barely glanced at because she listened. Her recorder sat beside a steaming cup of black tea. "What made you act?" Claire asked. The second question in. "They removed my room," Martha said, not blinking. "So I removed my silence." They spoke for over an hour. Martha shared not just the legal trail, but the emotional erosion, the small humiliations, the paper-thin tolerance that had been passed off as civility. She recounted the living room sofa, the football game blaring, and the day she realized Scott didn't just cross lines, he erased them. When Claire asked about Jenna, Martha didn't answer right away. She simply said, "Some people confuse keeping peace with surrender. My daughter never learned the difference." Claire took the silence with grace. She didn't rush to fill it. When the story ran the following Sunday, the headline read, "She reserved the room, then reserved a court date." By Claire Whitman, the Tideland Voice. The feature wasn't flashy. It didn't sensationalize. It laid out the facts like stepping stones, each quote from Martha planted with purpose. Readers learned how an aging widow fought back with documents, not tantrums, how she turned receipts into rope, and let Scott Carver tie his own noose. The response was swift. Martha's email pinged every 5 minutes. Subject lines like, "You're an inspiration. This happened to my mother. Thank you for not staying quiet." She didn't reply to most, but she read every single one. By Monday afternoon, the story had gone semi-viral. Charleston's elder law forums reposted it. A podcast clipped her quote about silence being complicity. Even a few national advocates for senior property rights shared the piece, calling it a case study in dignity-driven vengeance. That evening, Martha's voicemail buzzed with a name she expected, but a tone she didn't. "Jenna. I hope you're happy," the message began. "You embarrassed us publicly. You humiliated your grandson. You made everything worse." Martha played it once, then again. The second time, she didn't feel a pang, just a quiet certainty. She called Jenna back, short clipped rings, and let it go to voicemail. Her response was only 9 words. "No, you embarrassed yourselves. I just documented it." She hung up before the beep. 2 mornings later, as fog rolled off the marsh, Carmen arrived on the porch, holding a manila envelope, and a grin she didn't bother to hide. "Someone from the state capitol called this morning," Carmen said, holding out a folded letter. "A senator's aide. They want to quote you for a committee hearing on elder protection reform." Martha raised a brow. "Reform? Apparently your name's already circulating." Quietly but firmly. Like most good revolutions. Carmen winked. Martha took the letter and read it twice. She didn't smile. She nodded. Because justice, like age, only gets sharper when it's earned. The morning fog hung low, as if Charleston itself was holding its breath. Martha stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, gloved hands at her sides, her breath visible in the cold. Behind her, a patrol cruiser idled quietly, its engine a low rumble in the still air. "Ma'am," said the officer beside her, young but respectful, "we're clear to proceed." "You have the order?" Martha handed over the folded copy, already softened at the corners from rereading it. The seal from the judge shimmered faintly beneath the porch light. "Owner right of entry court mandated, Reed ver Carver Coastal Stays LLC." Scott had tried to bar her from the property, had filed a motion claiming hostile interference and harassment. The court denied it in under 6 hours. The officer stepped forward and entered first, opening the front door with a court-issued key. Martha followed, the scent hitting her like a slap. Stale beer, mildew, and something sour she didn't try to identify. The duplex no longer resembled the place she'd once co-owned with Alan. It didn't even resemble dignity. A gaping hole marred the drywall near the staircase, wires exposed like veins beneath torn skin. A shattered bar stool leaned sideways beside a cracked window. The rug she had handpicked in 1994 for its deep blue threading now bore 3 cigarette burns and a wine stain shaped like a boot print. She moved without hesitation. One step, then another. Click. She lifted her phone and took the first photo. Click, click. The bedroom door squealed open to reveal a broken dresser drawer and scuffed walls where something heavy had clearly been slammed. She took 6 photos from various angles, cataloging each scar. Her face didn't change. The bathroom smelled of bleach and mold. The mirror had been replaced with a cheaper version, unframed and already cracked at one corner. The vanity cabinet hung open, hinges missing. She took pictures. Every inch, every indignity. Looks like a frat house, the officer murmured under his breath. No offense. Martha didn't reply. She opened the camera app's court upload tool, tagged the file, property inspection. January 17 filed under damages and restitution evidence owner M. Reed defendant. S. Carver. She pressed submit. Outside, across the narrow strip, Scott stood beside his truck, arms folded over his chest, wearing that same faded hoodie from the hearing, the one with "Boss Up" stitched across the front. His jaw clenched so tightly she could see it from the porch. Beside him the mailbox door hung open, a single white envelope just visible inside. Carmen stepped up beside Martha, her boots crunching on the dead leaves. She looked once through the doorway, then turned to Martha. "You're calm," she said. "Calmer than I'd be." Martha tucked her phone away, smoothing her coat sleeve. "That's because I've already won. This is just the itemization." Scott took a step forward, but the officer raised a hand. "Sir, please remain off the premises. This is a court-ordered inspection. You think this ends with your little photo shoot?" Scott barked across the street. "No," Martha called back, voice even. "It ends in court." As if on cue, the process server rounded the corner from the sidewalk, a thick manila envelope in hand, pressed suit slightly wrinkled from the morning's deliveries. He moved with practiced purpose and zero hesitation. "Scott Carver?" he asked, stepping into the street. Scott rolled his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." "You've been served," the man said, holding out the documents. Scott didn't take them. So the man placed the envelope gently on the hood of Scott's truck and tapped it once. "Final notice, eviction damages and restitution hearing, scheduled." The officer returned to Martha. "You all set, ma'am?" She nodded once. "I've got everything I need." The envelope arrived unceremoniously, slipped under Martha's front door like a child's apology note. No postage, no name on the return corner, just a sloppily folded white paper peeking from a manila sleeve with one corner torn. Martha knew before she even opened it. It wasn't resolution, it was a stunt. Inside was a check made out to Martha Reed, in smudged blue ink, for the amount of $4,100, less than half of what Scott owed in restitution for property damage alone. The date in the top right corner was 2 weeks ahead. No signature, no memo. Just a bank name Martha didn't recognize, and the faint scent of cheap cologne on the envelope's glue flap. A note was scrawled in marker on the back. "Let's just end this like adults. No need to drag it out." She stared at it for a moment, long enough to register the insult disguised as a concession, then placed it in a plastic sleeve, marked it with the day's date, and added it to the evidence folder labeled Exhibit Raw, Insufficient Payment Attempt. By noon, she'd already reported the check to Terrence, who alerted the judge's office. By evening, the restitution claim had been amended. Attempted fraud via financial instrument, post-dated, unsigned, submitted with intent to delay legal proceedings. At 5:36 p.m., the doorbell rang. Martha opened it only partially. The security chain still latched. Jenna stood on the porch, eyes rimmed red, clutching her purse like it contained the last threads of her family. "Mom, please," she said, her voice cracking. "This is ruining everything. He's falling apart. I'm trying to hold it together for Noah, and you're making it worse." Martha didn't flinch. "No, Scott ruined everything. You just watched." Jenna blinked like she'd been slapped. "You think I wanted this? You think I liked choosing sides? I didn't even know about half of it. He kept things from me too. You knew enough, Martha said. You knew when he locked me out. You knew when he claimed what wasn't his. Silence is a choice, Jenna, and so is standing beside a man who cheats and calls it entrepreneurship. A rustling behind Jenna broke the tension. Noah stood on the walkway, arms folded. He hadn't seen his grandmother in 2 weeks, not since Christmas. His hair was longer now, tucked beneath a beanie, and his gaze darted between the two women, then to his father's truck in the street. Dad's a loser, he said, flatly. Jenna spun. Noah. He is, Noah said, louder. He lies to everyone. He lied to you. He lied to me. He lied to Grandma. And now he's mad that she did something about it. Martha's hand rested lightly on the doorframe. Noah. Jenna started again. Just stop, he said. You're not mad that she's fighting back. You're mad she didn't ask your permission. For a long second, the only sound was the wind tugging at the porch chimes and the crickets beginning to hum across the lawn. Martha slowly closed the door. Jenna's hand darted out. Mom, wait. Just please. The door didn't reopen. Inside, Martha leaned her forehead gently against the wood. Let the silence hold. Then she turned the deadbolt and walked back to her kitchen. Across town, Terrence sat in his office, tie undone, glasses off. His inbox pinged, an official court communication stamped with red priority. Notice, case docketed for public record Reed Vorv Carver Coastal Stays LLC, final hearing date confirmed. He sat back slowly in his chair, rereading the document. The clock had started ticking, and now the entire county could hear it. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet for the weight it held. Not silent, paper shuffled, shoes scuffed against the tile, but quiet in the way a storm calms just before it splits the sky. Martha stood in the hallway outside, dressed in a deep navy suit and modest heels, her pearls resting just above her collarbone like punctuation. She clutched a slim folder marked simply, Evidence. Her hands didn't shake. At 9:04 a.m., Scott swaggered through the courthouse doors with the smug gait of a man who still believed charm could cover fraud. He wore a rumpled gray blazer that didn't match his slacks, and flanked him was a local attorney Martha recognized from a billboard. Affordable defense, aggressive representation. He gave her a once-over as they passed. You dressed for church or something? Martha didn't respond. She just adjusted the folder under her arm and walked past him with all the noise of a tide turning. Inside the courtroom, the judge called them to attention. She wore no expression, but spoke with a clarity that filled the room. This is a final hearing in the matter of Reed ver per Kerfel Stoll Stays LLC. Allegations include property breach, personal exploitation, defamation, and unauthorized misuse of residential space for profit. Scott leaned back, arms crossed. The attorney beside him tapped a pen but said nothing. Martha remained still. Terrence sat beside her, flipping open the binder they'd worked on for months, color-coded, tabbed, and unarguable. When asked to approach the bench, Martha did not hurry. She stepped with grace, placed the folder on the stand, and looked the judge directly in the eyes. Your Honor, this folder contains corroborated guest records, tax avoidance patterns, unauthorized transactions, defamation screenshots, and records of ignored cease notices, all verified. The judge glanced at the tabbed pages. We've reviewed your submissions, Mrs. Reed. They meet evidentiary standards. Scott's lawyer rose. Your Honor, my client acknowledges there may have been informal arrangements misunderstood between family members, but the implication of exploitation. The judge cut him off. Does your client deny the profits were earned on property he does not legally own? Scott shifted. His mouth opened but nothing intelligent came out. It was family property in spirit, not in title. The judge's voice hardened. That's not how the law or taxes work. Then came the moment everyone in the gallery hadn't expected. The judge called Jenna Reed Carver to the stand. Jenna walked slowly to the front, eyes glassy, posture tentative. She avoided Scott's gaze entirely. Mrs. Carver, the judge began, did you know your husband was operating a business under your mother's name without legal consent? Jenna's voice cracked, but she didn't crumble. I didn't know all the details. I should have asked more questions. And why didn't you? The judge pressed gently. Jenna's shoulders shook. Because I thought I was protecting my son. I thought if I kept the peace, everything would settle. I was wrong. Noah, seated in the second row, looked at her not with anger but with something harder, disappointment. She felt it like a punch. The judge nodded. Thank you for your honesty. Then turning to Scott, her voice sharpened. Mr. Carver, this court finds you guilty of financial misuse of jointly titled property, attempted fraudulent restitution, public defamation, and repeated breach of owner consent. You are hereby fined in full, banned from the and referred for state business audit. All rental income shall be forfeited. Scott stood frozen, slack-jawed. Before he could speak, Martha rose, walked forward, and held out a scroll. He took it, confused. It was a rolled-up copy of the original deed, the one with her name, Alan's signature, and nothing of his. I believe this belongs to someone who respects what's real, she said simply. Outside, as the courthouse doors swung open, Noah stood on the steps beside her, his hand slipping into hers without hesitation. He looked up at her. Can I live with you this summer? He asked. Martha didn't smile. She didn't cry. She squeezed his hand once. You already are. The air inside the lower floor of the duplex still carried traces of old paint and sawdust, a scent Martha found strangely comforting. It was the smell of reclaiming, of undoing someone else's chaos and replacing it with care. Sunlight streamed in through freshly washed windows, dancing across the sand-colored walls. The old scuffs and dents were gone now, patched and painted over. The jagged baseboards had been replaced with crisp white molding. The floors gleamed, a warm oak finish, soft beneath bare feet. Martha stood in the center of what used to be a storage catchall of a room. Now it was a guest suite with a plush daybed tucked against one wall, a writing desk nestled under the bay window, and curtains the color of calm water, swaying gently in the morning breeze. On the door, a new wooden sign hung proudly, carved by hand and painted with delicate lettering, reserved for those who show respect. Noah emerged from the hallway, holding a hammer and a curtain rod still in its plastic wrap. His sleeves were rolled up. A faint smudge of blue paint streaked across his cheek. This goes above the nook, right? He asked. Right there, Martha said, pointing. Let the light in but frame it. They worked together in steady silence, the kind that came from trust. Each clink of the hammer echoed like punctuation, soft, precise, final. Carmen arrived an hour later with a still warm lemon pie in one hand and a sea glass lamp in the other. The lamp caught the afternoon sun and scattered soft green and blue light against the walls. Fits better here than it ever did in my den, Carmen said, placing it on the desk. Besides, every good room deserves its own glow. Martha smiled, a deep, satisfied thing that stretched all the way to her shoulders. Smells like healing in here, Carmen added, eyeing the pie cooling on the counter and the new art prints waiting to be framed. Noah called from the hall, tugging open a closet door. Hey Grandma, can I put my sketchbooks in here? It's your space, she said without hesitation. Fill it with whatever inspires you. He beamed, disappearing into the closet like a boy already home. Later that afternoon, Martha's phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. Jenna, one text. We'll be away for a while. Please take care of him. No punctuation, no apology, just space. Finally, Martha typed only one sentence in reply. Take all the time you need. She didn't send another message. There was nothing left to clarify. By twilight the room was complete. A knit throw folded neatly across the bed. Fresh towels stacked on a shelf. A soft playlist playing from a discreet speaker in the corner. Instrumentals, jazz, quiet piano keys. She stepped outside to the porch with Carmen, both of them holding glasses of sweet tea that clinked gently as they sat. You ever think it'd end like this? Carmen asked, kicking off her shoes. Martha exhaled through her nose, long and slow. I didn't think it'd end. Not for a long time. And now? Now, Martha said, rising to her feet and crossing to the wall just beside the entry. Now it needs one last touch. She reached into a small box by the door, pulled out a bronze plaque wrapped in velvet. The engraving was simple, elegant and deliberate. She held it for a long moment before securing it above the doorframe with two small screws. When she stepped back, the words caught the porch light and glimmered like a verdict. Room reclaimed. The newspaper crinkled in Martha's lap as she folded the page and refolded it, her fingers moving with the same quiet care she once used to draft affidavits and legal briefs. Her eyes lingered on the bold headline just below the county seal. Court finds for plaintiff in property misuse case. Elder fraud ruled willful and recurrent. A smaller photo beneath it showed Scott walking out of the courthouse, chin tucked, flanked by the same attorney who'd once swaggered into the hearing, with two mismatched cufflinks. The caption didn't mention the fine amount or the business audit now under state review, but the docket link was public. Anyone who wanted to know could. Martha didn't need to look again. She'd read it once, read it again, and memorized every line before clipping it and placing it in her archive. Not out of pride. Out of precision. The porch fan turned lazily above her. The afternoon breeze rustled the corners of the paper and carried the scent of rosemary and lemon thyme through the air. Carmen arrived just after noon, a small woven basket on her arm filled with fresh herbs, a jar of honey, and a bottle of white wine that had been chilled in her fridge since the verdict was read. She set the basket down with a satisfied sigh. "Smells like freedom in here," she said, brushing the leaves from her skirt, "and fresh paint." Martha smiled, unfolding herself from the rocker. "Smells like a woman who remembered where her boundaries live." From inside, the soft strumming of Noah's guitar drifted out through the screen door. A mellow rhythm, each chord deliberate like his sketches. He sat by the living room window in a faded t-shirt and pajama pants, barefoot, eyes closed as his fingers moved across the strings. The boy who once whispered apologies to his grandmother now filled her home with music. Carmen plucked a sprig of mint from her basket and raised her brow. "You ever going to tell me what's next?" Martha walked to the small garden table and poured 2 glasses of wine. "Next is peace," she said. "And maybe a little hospitality. The kind that doesn't expect silence in exchange for closeness." As if summoned by fate, Martha's phone buzzed on the windowsill. A notification popped up from a short-term rental platform, not Airbnb, but a smaller, ethically run site she'd researched thoroughly. The message was from a woman named Elise, a non-fiction writer from Vermont. "Hi Martha, I read your article in the Tideland Voice. I've been looking for a quiet place to work on a memoir about caretakers. Your suite sounds like the kind of space someone actually respects. Would you be open to a summer rental? I'd love to write near the ocean, if you're taking booking." Martha read the message twice, then once more for the warmth it left behind. She showed Carmen the phone. "You believe in poetic timing?" Carmen sipped her wine. "I believe in women who make space only for people who deserve it." Martha tapped reply. "Elise, I'd be happy to host. Just one requirement, bring a story worth telling, and leave things better than you found them." She hit send. The breeze picked up again, tousling her hair gently. The ocean sparkled in the distance, a streak of silver and blue just beyond the rooftops. A gull cried overhead. Noah's music swelled for a moment, then faded again into soft rhythm. Carmen looked at the brass plaque still mounted beside the guest suite door. "Room reclaimed. You still want to keep that sign up?" she asked. Martha looked out at the water, smile quiet but unshakable. "It's not about space anymore," she said. "It's about choosing who gets near me." She folded the newspaper, set it aside, and leaned back in the rocker as the breeze danced around her. "He said I didn't deserve a room, so I gave him a courtroom instead."